first person I heard the story from is a guy and his wife known as Mickey Beckworth. It was recited to my old man. Mickey was Frank Matthews' chief lieutenant. Mickey Beckworth was to Frank Matthews basically what Courtney Brown was to Eddie Jackson. And which is why they both met at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. and bonding grew a friendship. So Mickey, there was members of Frank Matthews' organization there, along with numerous heavy hitter players from all over the country.
Everybody came to town. Would this have been the first? Because Ali, so when Ali last fought in whenever, that wasn't getting all these black criminals. I mean, probably some, but not.
No, that was when it started. So the Ali Frazier fight gets the credit for the first time where the black underworld stepped out and showed the world, look, we here, we're a force to be reckoned with. But in reality, it was the Quarry fight. Pops and Eddie and all their crew, they went down to Cobo Hall to see it on closed circuit TV, which was a big deal back then. But numerous players from Frank Matthews' organization to those boys out in California, a lot of the Maurice Downs crew and all those guys who had left Detroit and went out to California and set up shop. Anyway, it was players ball, for real, players ball. They was all in Atlanta. And according to Mickey, and then later collaborated by, shout out to the OG Tyrone Stevens, check him out on the pod, one of America's premier confidence, man. I didn't know the details that you gave it how they actually did it, but what everybody knew was that all these players went to an after hours joint.
After the fight.
And
this is people's all into gambling.
Oh yeah, and you know, it's players are stepping out, and these are real heavy hitters. So ain't nothing for a brother to win $500,000, $250,000 worth of jewelry, watches, chains, rings. You gambling with other big fellas, so you might have $15,000, $20,000, $100,000 on you. And they show up at this after hours joint, and they all got laid down. This ain't like sticking up the local poker table. The people who pulling this off, you know, the first thing was like, somebody has some big kahunas, because you come at this collectible people.
So Mickey Beckworth, tell us how you heard it from Mickey Beckworth.
Just old fellas telling old stories.
Well, I mean, they just tell us about how your father and him continued their like.
Oh, okay. So you're right, because they locked up in the 70s. Friendship bond. They stay in touch. Mickey, something good might be happening. Boom, Pop would holler at him. We got something good. So at the last point we was in touch with Mickey, it's right when that Pakistani daddy was getting that bag out of Pakistan, right? And I think things have slowed down a little bit for Mickey and his regular people. So when he reached out to Pop was like, "Come to Detroit and holler at me. I'm working good right now." But even back to you know what? But now I think about it, I might have heard that story in the late 80s, even before the Pakistani plug, because during the Bohemian run, and I think actually I heard that story because Mickey had a coin laundromat in Brooklyn, and I was living in Fort Greene at the Griffin. Yeah, we're talking about 88. And Potsy came to see him to shoot a move, and because Mickey was doing work up in Albany and Rochester, New York. And anyway, so he repeated the story again in the 90s, but the first time he tells me the story about what him and they crew members was down in Atlanta, and they all went. He also, fortunately, like the other person I heard the story from, both got sidetracked from actually attending the party. I think both got distracted by some pretty women who, in this case, saved on a very bad night. So they both guys, Mickey and Tyrone Stevens.
And probably Frank Matthews.
And Frank
got a year later, he had a summit in Atlanta.
And in the backtrack, why they were all Atlanta had become, when you talk to the OGs from Atlanta, Atlanta had become, with its proximity to Fort Bragg, Atlanta had started popping as far as having a A1 job. All the OGs talk about whether it was Ike Atkins' crew and his family, Frank Matthews with his family
to Atlanta. That's
was coming into Atlanta heavy,
oh.
as they call it, from the Bragg. From the Bragg. Shout out to Ray Tato,
So
Mr. Getting Off Zero.
so the military base was the source of.
Everybody knew that something was popping around Fort Bragg. It was so, that the streets knew long before the authorities knew that Fort Bragg was ground zero for that China White coming in. Again, shout out to Ray Tatum from Getting Off Zero down in Atlanta. He an OG from Atlanta. He tell me story after story about everybody knew that the bag you were going to come across up there at Fort Bragg. That's who had it. The boys at the Bragg is who had that good thing.
Really?
Yeah, that was common knowledge. And because of its proximity from North Carolina to Atlanta, that's when that late 70s, when Ike Atkins and Frank Matthews and Frank Lucas was from down there, but he wasn't the one bringing the shit in. But Ike Atkins for sure and his network, and Frank Matthews for sure and his network, was deep in Atlanta. So it made sense that Atlanta had grew as far as people don't talk about it. Atlanta don't get its credit like Detroit or Harlem back in the day. But for those who in the union, who've been around and interact with them people, it was some brothers in Atlanta getting major bread. Major bread. That strip club that you hear Killer Mike talking about, the people behind that, the Blue Flame, they was major hitters in the game.
Even back in the 70s.
I'm talking about back in the 70s. The family who owned the Blue Flame go back to the 60s and 70s getting money. And they still own it to this day. And I'm sure they're out the game. They've been out the game for a minute. But yeah, Atlanta got a long, rich history of hustlers, top tier, as the authorities would call them, of top tier narcotic traffickers. Tier 1 narcotic traffickers. So anyway, all these heavy hitters is down here. They go into this after-hour joint, and Mickey say it was hustler's nightmare. They get to the after-hour joint, the place is packed, cars all lined up, and they all got laid down. All the jewelry, all your money, and detained. So I heard that for the first time in 88, 89. Then last time when Mickey came to Detroit, maybe 94, somewhere between 93 and 95. Story came up again, just in conversation. Then I put it together that, you know what, that's crazy. And then when the timeline's like, that's the scene out of Uptown Saturday Night with Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier at Madame Zenobia's after-hour joint. With the famous line, was Calvin Lockhart was the actor who says the line.
And they made them take off their clothes.
Yes. Never have so many, gave so much for so few, is the line he says as he's laying down Madame Zenobia's in the Uptown Saturday Night. So they just switched it. Instead of it happening in Harlem, instead of it happens in Atlanta in the movie Uptown Saturday Night, it happens uptown on the Saturday night, hence the name of the movie, Uptown Saturday Night. And brother, now Mickey never mentioned the aftermath of that. But when another OG, the OG Tyrone Stevens, who you can see on the channel, we interviewed him about 2 months ago. He was a confidence man, but he was at a high level doing the kind game and doing his pitch and drop hustle. He was running with the heavy hitters and hanging out, partying with them. So when he tells the same story the way Mickey told it, that there was all the heavy hitters was there, everybody was going to have a good time that night, and then they all got laid down at the after hour. But he didn't explain that it was a string of maybe up to 8, 9 homicides that end up happening to people who from that life that were all supposedly related to, as you can imagine, you can't rob 100 tier 1 bit hustlers who got friends and networks, and the streets gonna talk. And I mean, I think you had ran some numbers, but let's just say that the average victim.
They are estimating a couple million.
Yeah, I was gonna say
that money.
Yeah, and that's a couple million 1970 money.
8 times.
8 times minimum.
Yeah.
Minimum.
More, yeah.
Oh, yeah, because you could buy a new Rolls Royce in 1970 for $30,000. And a new Phantom or
What do they cost now?
new Phantom, new Ghost now starting off basic plain Jane, 400.
Oh, so that's more like 13 Jack.
Yeah. You can't get a Ghost Phantom. I mean, basic plain.
A millionaire might be more like 10 million now.
I think, man, I used to compare in the 80s. I assure you that having $100 in 1983 is better than having $1,000 in 2024. That's for sure.
Really?
When we had 5,000 in our pocket in 85, we were way more empowered than I feel with 50 bands now. You can't clown it. You can't clown with 50 bands now. Back 85, you clown with 5,000 in your pocket. Go into a club and make a spectacle. You try to make a spectacle at the wrong club in America, not with 50 bands. You went in to wash your dishes. You've been out. You've been exhausted. Start by, back then, what, a bottle of Dom Perignon retail, $160. I could buy 100 bottles. Walk into any bar, give it everybody. Did it. If everybody has a joint a bottle, not do that shit. You'd be like, sure, that'll be $180,000, please. Did you say table service too? You want it? So, yeah, but it's just interesting, that the Ali Frazier fight, or Ali's coming out of, or not coming out of retirement, Ali being allowed to fight again though that sets in motion Frank Matthews and his Chinchilla, Ebony magazine, same magazine that Eddie Jackson and crew is seen in. Of course, it's at the Ali Frazier fight where Eddie meets Carmine Lamondosi, who I believe about to do some stuff on, a.k.a. Doc Gambino, who was the chief lieutenant working directly under Carlos Gambino. That's how Eddie gets his China White plug. Frank Matthews hits national radar with that. The Ali's prior fight to that, the Jerry Quarry fight, leads to all these hustlers getting robbed and sends shockwaves through the black underworld. And then all of it, then maybe none of it happens if Ali doesn't start back fighting again in 1970.
Because what do you just comment on this and we'll leave it at James? When Ali when was it 66?
66, 67, because it was 3 years that he wasn't locked.
Okay, so when he went away, it was the peak of the, whatever, I don't know, whatever term you want to, pro-black, whatever term you want to describe.
Black Power was still at the Black Power movement.
So
you chronicle in.
Now, there were certainly, there's always criminals of every kind, so there were certainly black criminals or black guys selling drugs in 67, and some of the same guys, and there was probably a lot of money being made, but they weren't they were hiding. They weren't, not hiding, but they weren't necessarily the in thing, right? They were more subject to be put under pressure, maybe by parts of the black community, but by the time Ali comes back, those few short years later, blaxploitation film has started. Being a pimp or a drug dealer has started to be, in some quarters, kind of cool. The Black Panthers have been broken in some sense. Internal, but certainly external by the COINTELPRO. So the whole vibe of the culture has changed quite a bit in those few short years.
Most mark 68, 69. Nixon takes over in 68. We talked about, without getting deep into political science, maybe the Nixon administration took what's the French word, laissez-faire, hands off, as far as these black street hustlers and all this money that might be circulating, because seeing black men empowered who are not fight the power, down with the man, wearing berets, that we need to phase out that Huey Newton look, and these Negroes unwittingly driving their big Cadillacs and wearing their fur coats with all the diamonds. That's the capitalist dream that we need black men to be seen. And that America ain't that bad for black men, and you don't need to be burning up Detroit and Newark and Watts. That y'all need to do. Now, the fact that they knew that a lot of that money was being generated from the narcotic traffic, whatever. But it's a stark difference between after Nixon takes over. Only guys I ever heard prior to the Nixon taking over in 68 was right here, which you chronicled, Henry Marzak. He was still, Dr. Carl Taylor, shout out to Dr. Carl Taylor, he's going to be back with us again and Beyond Street Teams. Dr. Carl Taylor tells a story in the mid-60s of Henry Marzak double parking his Cadillac in the middle of Washington Boulevard, and it was obvious, and the streets knew he is the big dope man. And Pee Wee Kirkland was riding Rolls Royces, Corniches in 66.
But there was a lot less of those guys.
So it's on connect right. Now to your point, by 69,
suddenly there's a lot more.
There is, by 69, 70 here in Detroit, you got a tire. East Side 7, West Side 12, you got a tire.
When were you in Emmett Till get killed?
I was in late, up to 57.
Was this the 50s or was it the 60s? I mean, what year Emmett Till get killed? I should know that. It was more like the 60s, wasn't it?
It was closer to it was early 60s.
Ask the Overlord.
Well, my point of what I was going to say was, in the early to mid 60s, you still, like a interracial couple in public might forget a harass, they might get arrested. 55, okay. Wow. Either way, in 1964, black man and white woman in public would get arrested most places.
Some places are still illegal.
By 1970, you had posters of black pimps with white women, and people were going to watch it. Now, whether that was how much it was good, not to say that was rampant everywhere, but it was going on somewhere, and the fact it was even acceptable as a movie poster just goes to show how much
times changed
very rapidly.
And just to bring 2 points home right here to the Motown Mafia story and our whole situation. George Blair, who was listed as number 3 in the 30-man indictment on Eddie's crew, it was his bottom bitch, excuse my French, Ruth, who was a blonde-haired white woman who ended up being the cooperating witness that they did them in. But it was commonly known, right?
Oh, she was the worst one. Oh.
She did the damning. She did. Her and Roosevelt Neighbors, Johnny Quick was.
What about the phone tap?
That led to the rave.
Oh, did the prostitute and Neighbors, are they the ones who caused the phone tap?
No, that was the government. That was late. Well.
Oh, so the phone tap was bad. That led to the raid. So even without
the conspiracy, I would have charged them eventually. They were building a conspiracy case, and they would have been.
Prostitute and Neighbors heard them, but without them, they still probably had a case.
They were going to indict them for the conspiracy because they already caught Farrah Lee with the 2 bricks leaving New York.
And the raid was bad.
So that's just the bookends. The Farrah Lee's arrest in New York starts the indictment. The indictment ends with the raid on Hubble, the largest raid in Michigan history for some 40 years. But then you got to think, since you're doing that timeline, one of the chief attorneys, absolute legal legend and hero and legend in American history for those who do some deep digging, Milton Henry. In 66, Milton Henry is debating William F. Buckley and supporting his movement for the Republic of New Africa, talking about the United States government needs to give African Americans the 5 slave states of the Confederacy.
13.
Within 4 years, he's representing Eddie Jackson, Cordy Brown, in federal
And
court.
we were paid a lot of money.
And being paid more money than he ever made in his career.
Did he, what was his lifestyle after that? Not that he became crazy, but like, did he sort of seem to more like, hey, I want to have a big house and live nice?
Well, he was the first black person I knew who lived in Bloomfield Hills.
Which was a step up even from.
Yeah,
What year did he move there?
Right after when the case started.
Oh, that was money probably for the kids.
Yeah. No.
Oh, so he was a first black student moved to Bloomfield Hills. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How? Tell people in the early 70s what Bloomfield Hills must have been.
No, but
Might have been the nicest place in America or something.
Yeah, that's where all the big 3 leadership that wasn't in old money Rose Twink lived in Bloomfield Hills. John Ricardo, president of or CEO of Chrysler, stayed out there. Lee Iacocca, Ford fame, he stayed out there. All the new money executives. Well, that was a big, that's where Cranbrook is at. That's a big, big, big deal. So when I started going out to Bloomfield Hills and my sister started attending Cranbrook in the mid-'70s, there were 6 blacks in Cranbrook. There were 6 blacks. Back when I'm talking about, there were 6 blacks in the whole Cranbrook school system. That's including Brookside, Kingswood, Brookside Elementary School, Brookside Elementary School, Kingswood, the girls' version, and the boys' version, Cranbrook. And for those who don't know, once you get to 12th grade, then they become co-ed. But actually, for those who know that prestigious school, it's not co-ed until you get to your seat.
My grandmother was working for Sir Dan. They had an NBD bank. And his wife ran Cranbrook, and they were going to get me a scholarship. And I don't know what one not my.
You were spotted off.
They wasn't. They were like, and I didn't go. Well, I didn't feel like, but why am I making a decision? No one wanted to drive me out there. So I would have went to Cranbrook.
You're the second person I know because of something like that.
That's some dumb.
Well, and don't feel bad. I had a dear friend.
Well, just because it happened to somebody else don't make me not feel bad. Just because you got molested, Lou, don't feel bad. Me too.
I mean, the fact that they couldn't comprehend that you were about to go to school with the future ruling elite.
That's right.
And that with your IQ, with your intellect.
Oh, me there? Oh no,
it's a strip. You go. I can write your history. You go from Cranbrook to Harvard or Yale. And now you're running think
J.D. Vance.
Humbly. I mean, humbly, and as happy as we ought to have you here on West 7 Mile with us, it could have been a different trajectory. But yeah, Ali's ascension, that whole thing, that the flamboyant black champ saying F the man, the hustlers getting robbed at his event is fighted in Atlanta at Jerry Quarry. Then all the players who go see him do the fight of the century. It's a crazy convergence.
So the world changed just like that. And now what's interesting is it never. So you had the civil rights era. The first one that we think of is the We Shall Overcome era. That was maybe 10 years at the most. And you had that kind of turned into the hardcore, like black power, like not just we want our rights, but like some violent feelings maybe towards the system. That was only a few years long. And then now this total embrace of hedonistic capitalism has been 50 years. Now, I wonder what that means.
Well, it's chronicled. You listen to James Brown's music at that same time, the big payback, the whole propaganda brand. It was a whole change, kind of like we tried at the civil rights, the march, and
the civil rights era worked too. I mean, it got basic. Without that, I mean, that was actually effective, but it only went so far.
But a man like Eddie Jackson talking about no longer, I ain't trying to catch the streets, I'm trying to catch Rockefeller. That I'm so far away from yes sir and yes ma'am. I'm riding Cadillacs. I got diamond rings, and I'm living my life, and I'm a black man flaunting my wealth in a very unapologetic way. That was a phenomenon of that.
And just we'll close, but just we talked about some different knowledge. So of course we did Motown Mafia. We know how big Eddie Jackson was, but like you said, every time you talk about something, it's something new you had never heard before. Like when you just, what did you just tell me that I hit? Well, anyways, Eddie was doing who knows how much stuff outside of what he was the official organization. You said he had houses along the turnpike, and there's someone from Nicky Barnes. People came to see him. Like, talk about the inner relationships between the big guys and the big cities.
Well, okay, so just on our last...
It really was a burgeoning, and they were having these meetings. I mean, they were trying to make a black mafia.
So if you go to the podcast of Kingpins Kids on Spotify, what's the name of those people who did it?
I'm sorry.
Oh, Crime Town?
Crime Town, Kingpins Kid. You'll get an interview with the chief DEA officer, Ron Giovanni. I'm slaughtering the man's name, but he was the principal. They interviewed him along with me, Eddie Baby, Pep, and they were doing a whole thing about Comium, Detroit. Anyway, but they tracked down Ron Giovanni, who was the head DEA investigator of the Eddie Jackson thing. He did not know throughout none of it that Eddie was being supplied by Carmine La Mendoza and the Gambino crime family. He states in his interview that the hypothesis as far as where Eddie was always getting his work from was that he was a offshoot of the Nicky Barnes organization. And he says this story about how this guy Heavy, who, and I don't hear this name, first time I hear this name is Ferran Giovanni and Cavario. So that there was this, he's got Eddie under surveillance. This guy known as Heavy, who was a big hitter coming out of Harlem. Eddie picks him up from the airport. They have some kind of car issue. Eddie has that Cadillacs come pick up him and Heavy off. So that's sealed in Ryan Giovanni's mind. He's got Eddie Jackson with this guy Heavy, who is a known associate of Nicky Barnes. Only black men in the country who can get dope at the quality that Eddie's getting it is Nicky Barnes and those guys up in Harlem. Eddie just got to be the Detroit branch of the Harlem Council, that cabal of Harlem heavyweights, right? Eddie just is not that he's got his own plug with the tanks. That's not what the government thought. Then I don't hear it again till Cavario is kicking his game and going down about all the days back in his people's day on 115th Street and who was banging on 116 on 115th Street. And he was like in Heavy, because I think Cavario was on 115, his family, and he was like Heavy was on 116. He was getting $1 million a day. That was like Heavy. I was like, wow, that's the guy that the fans was talking about. Why they thought so it was all.
But you think Eddie might have been giving them the dope?
But what they didn't know is that 9 times out of 10, Heavy was getting a bag from Eddie. Because we don't know Eddie's real estate holdings until Eddie gets violated and has to start, because he leaves jurisdiction, going to another fight. This time going to Ali Frazier, going to the Ali.
No, when 77, what did he get violated for?
In 76.
Yeah, what was that fight?
I think that was
Holmes or something?
No.
Bill Leslie?
This is still Ali.
Ken Norton or some shit?
It was either Ken Norton or any Shavers. Somebody was fighting in Vegas. He decided he had to go to the fight, even though the feds had told him you ain't allowed to leave the Metro Detroit area.
But they had been leaving.
He didn't follow rules well. But anyway, so he has to go away. He starts his sentence a year before the rest of the crew. The rest of the crew has to surrender themselves in 77. But so, at Eddie's house, of course, we're still living next door to each other in Southfield. All of a sudden, these tax bills start coming from houses in Fort Wayne, Indiana, houses in Saginaw, tax houses in Flint, houses in Skokie, Illinois, houses in Cleveland, houses up and down I-75 in Indianapolis and all the surrounding, all these places. And he was buying houses. The move that gets him the show, Pops, his chief lieutenant, doesn't know that him and 5-0 about to go to New York. Butch, none of the rest of the crew knew when that mission where him and 5-0 RIP, Corrado 5-0 Garrett, when they go to New York and the Guineas give them eight bricks of raw, 3 bricks of Yale, and they get popped on the way back into Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, eventually, of course, they bought their way out of that case. But that was the one time on a spur of the moment, let me go shoot a move time that Eddie got caught. There is no telling how many spur of the moment, let me go pick up 10 bricks of jive and shoot with
$1 million on the side of what your father was overseeing.
Right. And then,
So you think with all these houses, wherever cities he had, he probably had something going on.
I think the only reason I was to believe that he was actually just buying them as hookup and meeting houses.
At those other cities.
In some other cities. So, right. So maybe.
So he might have had little junior Courtney Brown lieutenants in Flint and Indianapolis.
At his height, to be honest, nobody, even his closest people, don't know how much money he was making. And the way he compartmentalized the crew. There were moves him and Black Butch would shoot that the rest of the crew didn't know about. There were things him and Pop was doing that the rest of the crew, and now as a grown man looking back and see these guys, and there were things I'm sure that him and Rudolph did that didn't everybody know about, him and Jap did that didn't ever, he would. So when you do that, and when you combine the main organization of we run the projects, we distribute it to all the other big fellas, and then come to find out, well, shit, he was supplying. He had a bag in Kansas City. It was his bag that was in Saginaw. It was his bag that was in Flint. It was his bag that was in Muskegon. It was his bag at Fort Wayne, Indiana.
And what about the Kansas? I just remember about Kansas City. You said what percentage did he probably he was the biggest person in Kansas City?
Yeah, because I want to say his name is Joe. Kansas City Joe is his street name. But Eddie Reed hooked up with him in the 80s, and that's how I found out that he had been supplying Kansas.
Oh, you met him?
Since the 70s, right? Yeah, because he brought, when that bag, that same bag that Pep and them was run through the Evil Chronicle in Beyond Street Dreams, portions of that same bag, you just did the story on Mary Wakefield on your station, on your channel. That same bag, or that skag, that China White, that Marion Wakefield was getting in, and the Eddie and them in the putting down with Pep and them here. Portions of that bag made it to Kansas City then. That's in 83, 84. And he had had that pipeline to Kansas City since his glory days in the 70s. Now this thing is, it's all really, really connected. And as you noted early in this journey, at a certain level, like a pyramid. And once you get high enough at the pyramid, everybody is touching everybody.
And so I would think it would be fair to say, I mean, we throw around this term, Black Mafia, but at that time, the black guys that have been dealing with this, at least interacting to some degree with the Italians in different cities, and they would have been aware of, wow, these Italians got these alliances across all these different cities. Why don't we try to do that? And it would only be logical.
It was only logical, and it happened.
And almost said it sort of worked, but not quite.
Well, Chucky Goldfarb, shout out, R.I.P. just passed, legend in this town. But Chuck and Irvin Goldfarb bail bondsman still exists downtown Humboldt, right? Same bail bondsman for Nicky Barnes, same bail bondsman for Eddie Jackson. Clarence Gale, whale of a guy out of Chicago. Him and Nicky owned property in Pontiac together. In fact, it was Clarence Gill that introduced my father to Nicky Barnes at the 20 grand. So the convergence, it just never, I think the black guys at the top of the heap never formalized it structurally, but their network.
They were trying to, like when Matthews had his meeting in Atlanta, they were trying to.
Yeah, because the network and the knowledge of each other was already there. Al got assuredly that China White bag, because the China White bag only was coming from the mob through Frank Matthews.
And Galen Fairley, the military.
Ike Atkins, right, which is the military.
Well, that's what we know about it. But you think about it, the idea that there was white soldiers too. If there was a black soldier doing what Ike Atkins was doing, we'd think it wasn't no white.
No, I think there was 20 whites
that's right.
doing what Ike Atkins was doing.
And maybe another black one.
And he was a sergeant.
Right.
I think there were some lieutenants and colonels
and generals
doing what because
it's just random black guys who bring 4 kilos here and there.
And I was gonna say in the thing, gypsy bag, who knows how many gypsy bags came out of Southeast Asia. But if I'm the general and I know what the general for the Vietnam Cong and our allies in Southeast Asia, they're the ones orchestrate.
Yes.
And I run the numbers and you tell me, one of these kilos go for $100,000 back home. All I got to do is bring in 500 of them one time, which I can do without anybody ever questioning me. Not one military officer did that. I mean, come on, let's be. But as all respect to Ike Atkins, I don't think he was the only one that figured that part of the game out. But yeah, man, that Atlanta Fort Bragg, we have to get some of the Atlanta.
Yeah, that's new. Yeah, I never heard that, but it makes sense.
Yeah, if he, Ray Brother Sweet was a big time gambler, big enough to where when Frank Matthews would come through the after hour joints in Atlanta and in Durham, they would go to my man Ray Tatum's brother Sweet's spot. So it was a place. But well, yeah, when the heavy hitters do.
They met Frank Manti.
Yes. 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 And
I got to interview Ray. So Ray Tatum met Frank Manti, at least in passing.
in passing, and is very knowledgeable of that whole Fort Bragg, Atlanta.
Oh no, I got to interview him later.
Yeah, about that whole Fort Bragg, Atlanta back and forth. Yeah.
Tyrone meet him?
Frank Matthews?
Yeah.
No, he had this interlude again, just like everybody meet.
Right.
The Mickey Bar.
I think a bar.
That's good. All right, that was dope.